Now, the Balfour Declaration has been described as one of the most controversial and contested documents of modern Arab history. It led to the creation of the State of Israel and the forced expulsion and displacement of millions of Palestinians from their historic land. Now, this is what Palestine looked like 100 years ago. And what you're looking at is a swath of land marked in white, solely encroached upon by a sea of gray. It shows how Palestine disappeared from the map. Palestinians are now only allowed limited self-rule in small pockets under Israeli military occupation, the longest in modern history. Joining us on set here in Doha is Marwan Bishara, Al Jazeera senior political analyst. How would you characterize the implications, the effect of the Balfour Declaration?
Well, certainly it was the beginning of the success story for the Zionist movement and for the beginnings of the foundation of the State of Israel. There's no doubt that this was a key date for the beginning of the success of that movement, because it was the time when the most important power at the time, Great Britain, recognized that the Jews have a right for a homeland in Palestine. And in so many ways, the Zionists went on and built settlements and built the structures for the pre-state and later on the state. And the state, as we know, expanded after 1967, and it became what it is today, probably the most powerful country in the Middle East. That's for the Zionists. For the Palestinians, of course, it was like a zero-sum game. It was exactly the opposite. That was the true beginning of their catastrophe.
And did it have to be a zero-sum game?
It didn't have to be, it was. And we will go to the idea of what the leadership's responsibility is. But in the end of the day, what was a Zionist success story for the lobbying of Great Britain, for lobbying of the leaders in London to recognize that homeland for the Jews, for the Palestinians, that was a total catastrophe. That was the beginning of the major settlements and encroachments on their land. That was the beginning of dispossession, leading to their catastrophe in 48, and leading to the fleeing or the kicking out of 2/3 of their population, and for all of their land to be either possessed or occupied by Israel. I think the key date, and as far as I'm concerned, I mean, none of this is strange, right? The Zionists and the Palestinians. I think what's really a mystery to me is how the official leaders in Britain today, I mean, Prime Minister Theresa May,
yes,
is responding to this 100 years.
How would you like her to respond?
Well, look, I mean, Great Britain, like the United States, are both now going through re-examining their colonial and racist pasts. In the U.S., racist past, slavery, and so on and so forth. In Great Britain, it's a question of the days of empire, the days of colonialism. You would have expected Prime Minister May to say, look, these were 100 years ago. We were a colonial power, we were an empire, we did all kinds of things. I mean,
you're saying just an acknowledgement?
Acknowledgement of what the past was. Just like in America, they're bringing down monuments. You would expect that Prime Minister May does not erect a monument for Balfour, that you would recognize that this was part of a racist, even anti-Semite. They just didn't like the Jews. Balfour didn't want the Jews to immigrate to Great Britain, to London. So he made sure that they would immigrate elsewhere, to Palestine. So there was a bit of anti-Semitic approach to this promise, to this declaration by Balfour. Be that as it may, what's really intriguing as well is that 100 years later, we're actually discussing the same thing. Colonialism of Palestine. Instead of Great Britain, now we talk about the United States. Instead of Balfour promising a land that it does not belong to Great Britain, to a people that did not live in Palestine, without consulting the people who lived in Palestine, the Palestinians. Today, American leaders are promising land in Palestine, like the big settlements, to Israel. They're considering that Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, that is mostly Palestinian, to become the capital of Israel, again, promising land that's not theirs to people who don't live there without consulting the indigenous population. So 100 years later, 100 years since Balfour,
we're in the same place.
We're still in the same logic.
In the same place.
With the same disaster.
Marwan Bishara, thank you very much for your input as always.